So here's our third video on science and belief in the transcendent. When I left off at the last video, I pointed out that one of the things that's wrong with trying to use science to fulfill a psychological need for certainty is that science can't actually prove anything for certain. Now, there is such thing as scientific proof or strong, sound scientific theories. And I do personally believe in science, but I also admit that there is an assumption that we have to make for science to work in the first place. And that's we have to assume that that there's a correspondence between what we see, what we perceive in reality, right? So the reason that science can't actually prove anything for certain is because of the nature of subjectivity. What does that mean, the nature of subjectivity? Well, the nature of subjectivity is the fact that everyone perceives all phenomenon, right, through their own consciousness. So, for example, if I see a bird, I know I saw a bird because I perceived it as a sight in my own mind, right? I see a bird, right? Now, I assume that there actually is a bird out there that corresponds to what I'm perceiving in my mind. But I can't prove that. That is actually an assumption. Right? Now, is it a wise assumption, a good assumption, a prudent assumption? Yes. I'm not suggesting that we do not have faith in the correspondence between our perceptions and reality. But I can't prove that, right? That actually operates on faith. It's a belief that I hold for a good reason, but I cannot prove it definitively. Well, why not? Why can't I prove it definitively? Well, I mean, let me explain it to you. Let's say if I saw that bird, right? And then I turned to my friend who was standing next to me and I said, wow, look at that bird. Have you ever seen one like that? It's so blue. And my friend said, what are you talking about? I don't see any bird. In other words, I see the bird and he doesn't. Now, what is going on? And we're both staring at exactly the same place, and one of us saw a bird and one of us saw nothing. What the heck is going on there, right? And I would say to my friend, you're lying or you're crazy. And my friend would say, no, you're lying or you're crazy, right? One of us sees a bird, one of us doesn't. How do we know then that there's a bird or not? Well, we're going to call on some other people, right? So we get our other friends. We call them up and we say, hey, stand here, look right there, right? Do you see a bird? And if I'm the only one who sees a bird, then everybody would say, we don't see a bird. You're the only one who sees a bird. You are hallucinating or something, right? So we would say the reality is that there's no bird, and the person who's seeing a bird is not seeing reality. They're crazy or they're hallucinating or something's going on that they are seeing a bird that's not there, right? I mean, that's basically science, right? Well, if it's the other way around, think about the other way around. If everybody sees the bird except for my friend, the original one, right? Then everybody would be like, there is a bird. The bird is real. You, friend who don't see the bird, you have a problem. You're like hallucinating no bird, or something's going on. You might be having like a patch of blindness, right? You might be having some problems with your perceptions, right? But the bird is real. No bird is not real in that case, right? What are we doing there? We're doing science. This is how the scientific method works. You make conclusions about reality based on shared observations, right? Sound theories and conclusions are found in repeating the same experiments, right, with the same variables and getting the same results. So, I mix Mentos and baking soda and it explodes. And I write Mentos and baking soda. Sorry, what am I talking about? Mentos and Coca-Cola, or baking soda and vinegar, right? Go ahead, mix Mentos and baking soda, see what happens. You're just going to get some dusty Mentos. Could be good, though. Don't eat too much baking soda, though. That'll hurt your mouth. Okay, anyways, do you understand what I'm saying? I'm doing a scientific experiment. What happens when I put vinegar and baking soda together? Volcano. Okay. Let's see if that happens every time. Let's call my my brother and he'll do it. And then if it works every time we mix baking soda and vinegar and it explodes every time, then we can say baking soda and vinegar has this explosive reaction, right? Or Mentos and Coke, whatever it is, right? That's how we do science. We have repeated common observations. But if it doesn't happen every time, if we don't have repeated identical observations, then we didn't show anything, right? We didn't prove our hypothesis. We didn't come to a conclusion. And I use that term prove loosely. But this is where the nature of subjectivity comes in. And why? So we say science, has to operate with a little bit of faith in that first step, right? Because we've established that the perception of the bird I have in my mind is real, right? We say I perceive bird in here, therefore there must be bird out there, because all these other people also perceive bird. So I validated it by their experience. And my poor friend here, a student of bird, is having some kind of locational blindness, right? In other words, I validate my experiment. Is bird there? I see bird. I see bird, right? I look, I see bird. They look, they see bird. She looks, she sees birds. He looks, he sees birds, right? So bird is real. And I know that because I perceive the bird in my mind and these other people also perceive their bird in their mind. Oh no, here's the step, right? I have validated that the perception is real through the observation of 8 out of 9, 10, and 8 out of 9 friends. So we all see the bird, so the bird must be real. And I know that the bird must be real because I perceive 8 of my 9 friends telling me they see the bird in my mind, right? Wait, how do I know that these 8 out of 9 friends see the bird? How do I know that they also see the bird? Because they're telling me that they see the bird, and I hear them and see them tell it in my mind. In other words, I'm still inside myself. It's still my mind and my perception that's telling me that these 8 people see the bird, right? So, for example, what if we just did this whole bird thing and 8 of my 9 friends says, "Oh yeah, I see the bird." Or sorry, 8 of 9 of us say we see the bird, right? And one doesn't. But then a neighbor stopped by and said, "Hey, what are you up to?" And I say, "Hey, well, I saw this bird. My buddy didn't see this bird, so we called over our 7 other buddies, and they all saw the bird. So we think he has some kind of problem." And the neighbor looks at me and just says, "I don't see anyone here except you and me." Dun, 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 dun. Right? In other words, he doesn't see the 8 friends, 7 of which see the bird. In other words, now how do I validate that these 8 friends of mine are real and I'm not just imagining them? At this point, I'd probably be pretty freaked out and think, wow, I'm really losing it, right? Right? Because me and my 8 friends, who might all be just in my mind, say to him, "Oh, you're lying or you're crazy." And he would say, "No, no, you're lying, you're crazy. There's no one else here. It's just me and you. Are you putting me on?" Right? Some kind of joke. And so what would we do? We'd call over 3 other neighbors, these 3 guys. And we'd ask them, "Hey, look, I think that there's, let's see, us 8, 9, 10 people in this room. He thinks that there's 2 people in this room, just me and him. Well, which one is right?" And if they all these guys saw the 8 people, all 8 friends, right? Plus the neighbor. all 8 friends plus a neighbor, right? Then they would say, oh yeah, no, we all see the 8 people. And then I'd be like, oh, okay, so I'm not crazy. You're crazy because you can't see the 8 friends that saw 7 of which saw the bird. So then I would know that the bird and the 8 friends were real because I perceived my neighbors telling me that they saw them, right? And how would I know that? Because I perceived it all in my own mind. Oh my gosh. So wait a minute. But what if the 3 neighbors who came over and saw the 8 friends and the other neighbor, what if they're just, how can I validate that they're real? Should I call someone else over to ask if they see the 3 neighbors who see the 8 friends who see the 8 birds too? Well, I'd still have the same problem. Do you understand? I'd still only know that they're having the same results as me, that they're perceiving the same things as me, because I'd only know that in my mind, right? And how would I know if that person was real or not? So I hope you understand what I'm saying here. Everything we experience is within our own consciousness, and we can't step outside of it. One time I was talking to a friend about this, and for some reason they got really mad. And I think it's because, like I said, I was inadvertently threatening their their certainty of existence, because I just thought, well, if you can sense it, then it's real, right? And I said, well, I don't know how we got on this. It's not usually a good topic to talk about, especially late at night. But they said, well, I can prove to you that I actually exist. I'll punch you in the face. And I said, well, first of all, please don't get upset about this. I believe that you exist. I'm just saying it's an act of faith for me to believe it. I believe that there is a correspondence between what I perceive and reality. But again, it's an act of faith. If you came and punched me in the face, that would not prove that you exist. That would only prove that in my consciousness, right, in my experience, in my subjective mind, I am being punched in the face. It would hurt, but it would not prove, right, that there was a correlation between my sensation and perception of being punched in the face and external or objective reality. Right? I know this is a pretty far out and trippy. What's the point? Well, again, the problem with subjectivity is that observation, including repeating observation by multiple sources, right, which is the scientific method, does not provide certitude about the existence of anything. Because all that observation and validation can only be observed from what? Within one's own consciousness. It's still all happening inside your mind. This is called solipsism when it starts to get into extreme forms. That's impossible to prove anything exists outside your own consciousness. And I'm sorry, this is just a philosophical fact. Again, I'm not trying to freak out anybody out here or weird you out, but it is technically true, right? Now, does this mean that we shouldn't believe that our perceptions have any correlation to reality? No, I think we should, right? We have good reason to. There's like pretty consistent interaction. It does really seem that way, but the biggest reason is probably the intuition, right? Our belief, right? Like we know it in our hearts somehow, right? So I said we prudently assume that there is a correspondence between what we perceive and what actually exists. When I see a bird, I think there is a bird. When I pet my dog, I think that there really is a dog, right? But you cannot actually prove that what you perceive exists, and that it's actually an act of faith to assume that there is a correspondence between what we perceive and what actually exists. It's a quote we'll look at later. So the science itself right? The repeated observation of the same results when we do experiments using the same variables by different people, right? This validation is really also an act of faith. Why? Because we have to take it on faith that what we're perceiving, right, corresponds to reality. We have to take it on faith that it's not just all a dream. We have to take it on faith that we're not um, some kind of a simulated computer program or something, simulated program that is programmed to think that is a human being doing a science experiment or a human being looking at a bird, right? We have to assume through faith that what we perceive is real. And that's a good move. That's the way it should be, in my opinion, right? For the most part, right? We should assume this correspondence. But we have to admit it's an act of faith. So, schools of thought like scientific materialism that say that only things that can be empirically and objectively verified are real, they seem to ignore the fact that there's no empirical and objective way to prove a correlation between our perceptions and reality. And it's an act of faith, right? It's a belief in something we can't prove for certain. Something we have a good reason to believe, but we can't prove for certain. That allows us to assume a correlation between perceptions and reality. And so, therefore, science itself is dependent on faith, right? Faith on a correlation between our perception and reality. Right? Now, once again, science is a good way to know the truth about perceptual reality. I'm not saying here don't believe in science. No, I'm saying do believe in science, but realize what you're doing as the same thing you're doing when you do anything is you're believing. Hmm? It's not a matter of some objectifiably verifiable, absolute, undeniable truth. There is an element of faith involved. And that's why, right, we shouldn't use science to try to fulfill a psychological need for certainty. And certainly not at the extent of saying, if you can't see it with science, if you can't prove it with science, then it doesn't exist.